The practice of beak tipping, removing the end of hens' beaks to prevent feather pecking and cannibalism, has long been controversial. A ban is due to come into force in 2016, but farmers claim that without other means of preventing pecking, welfare consequences will be dire. The government has commissioned a study being carried out by Bristol University to investigate whether there are alternative ways of stopping it. Well, now free-range egg producers are calling for an early review of the unpublished findings because, they say, there have been serious pecking problems in at least one of the large-scale flocks taking part. DEFRA was due to look at the study next year, but Robert Gooch from the British Free-Range Egg Producers Association told me it needs to feed into any decision on the 2016 ban as soon as possible.
The evidence so far is that the results from the bigger flocks in the government study, there are lots of high levels of mortality, and we think that there's probably enough evidence now for the government to be able to make a decision early, as farmers and my members who are producers of free-range eggs have a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads, worrying about whether they're going to have to try and deal with huge number of welfare problems if the government bans the beak trimming.
The study is being undertaken, and wouldn't it be better to allow it to run its course? It sounds as if you just want any ban on beak trimming to be delayed for as long as possible.
Well, we do. I mean, for the welfare of the birds, we need it delayed until methods and the breeding of the birds is changed so that no injurious pecking and cannibalism and mortality will occur in these flocks.
Do you think an alternative will be found?
I think with time, I think one of the problems is that there are so many factors coming into play. And the farmers' management is one, and we're working very hard with the RSPCA, Freedom Foods, and the scientists to find new technology which will reduce the risk. But also the animal breeders and the poultry geneticists also have a role to play.
You believe it could be selected for in genetics?
My understanding is that it is a trait that can be selected for, though its heritability is relatively low. It can be selected for, and so it is one thing that really needs looking at in detail.
Some welfare campaigners believe that beak tipping in itself is a painful mutilation, which could be prevented through giving hens a better environment. Do you believe that it could be got rid of if the environment is right?
Yes, and this is what this pilot study is all about. So the 20 flocks, which we'll be talking about, is all about trying to find better environments, enriching the environment so that the hens do other things other than peck each other. And we're fully supportive of that work, and indeed all the flocks in the trial have been volunteered by farmers. You know, the industry is working hard with scientists to try and find a way forward so that beak tipping won't be a conventional and everyday practice in free-range husbandry, but at the moment we haven't reached that stage yet.
Robert Gooch from the British Free-Range Egg Producers Association. Well, DEFRA told us it's listening to all parties and it needs time to conduct a thorough review and to consider all available evidence, along with the outcome of the research, which concludes in 2015. Well, Mia Fernyhough is Senior Science Officer for Laying Hens at the RSPCA. I asked her if she thought an alternative to beak tipping could be found.
There's been quite a lot of focus on the negative aspects that have arisen during the trials to date. What there hasn't been a lot of focus on is the positive aspects that have come about in those trials. So we're aware of at least one trial, at least one producer, where there has been the early signs of an injurious pecking outbreak. And by implementing the intervention suggested by Bristol, they've actually managed to turn that around, and the flocks finished with very good welfare indicators, very low levels of mortality.
You're not saying that leaving beaks full will definitely always cause pecking?
There's so many underlying factors that can lead to injurious pecking that there can't be a single solution. And at the moment, the industry solution is beak tipping, but that's obviously not dealing with the underlying issue. And what we need to look at doing is tackling that underlying behavioural problem where birds are pecking each other. And there are interventions that do work, but they don't work every time consistently. So it's about finding the management practices where we can sufficiently reduce the risk of injurious pecking in those flocks.
If some of those commercial flocks are having birds attacking each other because their beaks have not been tipped and they are causing damage to each other, then it is natural, isn't it, to say, hang on a minute, are we doing this right? Because birds are being injured.
We have to look at these trials. We have to trial this. We have to see what interventions do work and what interventions don't work, to be in a position to make a final decision on whether there should be a ban or not. I think to abandon the trials at this stage would be premature, and we need the evidence from those trials to tell us what does and doesn't work. And perhaps we get to a stage at the end of those trials where we don't go for an all-out ban, but there are other things that we can look at. So, for example, we could look at using the model that they currently implement in the pork industry, where tail docking is permitted by exception. We say, actually, there's a partial ban, and you are only allowed to trim your flock if you have put every intervention in place and still have issues with feather pecking.
So what priority would you like to be seen given to things like the environment that the hens are put in before beak trimming is used?
There's several that have seemed to be particularly important that the Bristol trials have shown. One of those is litter quality, having very dry, friable litter that the hens can forage and scratch and dust bathe in is very important in preventing injurious pecking. Range factors, if they are free-range hens, seem to be very important, so getting the hens out on the range. And the early experiences of the pullets, the young birds, is also very important, so rearing them in a way that matches the environment that they're going to go into as laying birds.
Mia Fernie-Ho from the RSPCA. That's all from us this morning. I'm Anna Hill. The producer in Bristol was Sarah Swadling.